Hello and welcome to the DigitalEDU Dialogues podcast. I'm Angela Britcher, and today Sheila Fry, the COO of the Babb Group, is joining me. Welcome back to the podcast, Sheila.
Always good to be here. Always good to talk with you. Glad we have some good things to talk about today.
Yes, we are very excited. The Khloe 10 report just came out, and we are going to talk about what Khloe 10 is and cover the highlights of this year's report. But first, what I want to do is explain what the Khloe report is. It is an annual survey of college and university leaders, particularly online divisions, if a school has one. And this survey is all about their priorities, what they are investing their time and money and energy and future proofing into. And I think the big thing about this year is that the report highlights that online learning demand remains very high.
Yeah, absolutely. And it really reinforces everything they've talked about before on a higher level, and then obviously some new things. So there's so much to absorb, and it's a big report. It's always a lot of important data, a lot to sit and absorb and read about. But it's nice when you're ingrained in online all the time and to have those important leaders who are in the front lines of this be able to give that feedback so they can report this out to everybody is fantastic.
Yes, and we read the report.
Yes.
And so we are going to share the big highlights. So we'll start with sharing the highlights, and then we'll dig in a little deeper into each one of these and how schools can operationalize these and really take advantage of these trends. So first, one of the things that the report found is that student demand for online learning continues to grow. But the competition for online is growing as well, since students are looking for that. And jump in any point, Sheila, as I'm going to read these off my actual piece of paper. Student support needs to increase, and leaders are thinking about how AI is going to impact how student support services are delivered. Schools are they're seeing a demand and an increase in both degree and non-degree areas when it comes to online. And they're investing in new programs, right? So it's not just we're taking old programs, moving them online or offering online options, but investing in new online programs.
Much bigger thinking, much broader scope. Absolutely.
Faculty readiness and instructional capacity continue to be an issue. That all this expansion is happening, but the investment in training faculty to do it and do it well still needs to be worked on. And the other thing is investing in AI and strategies and how that's going to work as we move forward and as schools move forward. What's the role of AI going to be in this increase in online learning demand?
That's some stuff, isn't it? I mean, that's what I mean. So many of those things that we know from the past, we know online's growing. We know we're doing those things. But I think this year's one points out, especially the AI area, but reinforcing the faculty and looking at growth, not only just courses, but programs. I know we're going to dig into these, so we'll talk about that a little more, but I think there's some really key takeaways that leaders can look at and say, how are we tackling all these? So it'll be good to talk about all these.
Well, and I think that first thing is understanding the demand from students. I think post-COVID, we first heard like, oh, we just want everyone to come back and we want to get back to whatever normal is. But now realizing that one of the stats was nearly 9 in 10 colleges plan to expand online based on student demand. So schools are saying we have to invest in this because it's what students want. And that it's not just for adult learners. It's not just for non-traditional learners. It's not just for graduate programs, that undergraduates are demanding more online, and that schools are saying we're going to invest in it. And we are going to create more programs that are fully online or have online and hybrid options for students.
Well, they're listening now. I mean, we see that a lot. We see that a lot in articles. We see it in blogs. We see it in what leaders talk about. But they're listening now to what the students have said. Like you said, post-pandemic, everybody thought, okay, we're going back to normal. People are going back to campus. We'll still have our online, but, we're going to have the core focus of these are the programs we have. This is what the students want. Well, now they're listening and saying, kind of because they had to. I mean, there's struggles. We all know that education is going through unprecedented situations right now with changes that some can and can't handle on a variety of levels, but then say, stop and look and say, okay, this is where the trend is. This is where we're seeing it. We really can't ignore it anymore, because as much as we want to stay on our little high horse and this is what we do, if we're going to be successful and we're going to be, open, as unfortunately as we've seen some have had to change and close in the last year or get absorbed by another school, they need to listen. So the students are saying, like you said, I want options. Maybe it's hybrid. Maybe it's all, the predominant one is still asynchronous online. But maybe there's synchronous. Maybe it's all of a sudden it's the graduate areas that are growing more in most. We see the data in there says that the greatest growth and looking at online is in the public four-year institutions, which I think is very exciting because that represents probably the biggest bulk of students. But what else stuck out there, to me especially, was the fact that they're talking about almost 80% recognize that competition has increased so much in the last 5 years. And I think that's going to get worse. I mean, think about it. It's almost like if you want to go compare it to online shopping, you're one click away from your competition. So the same thing is going to apply to students. They're not geographically fixed to attend your specific institution. They can go anywhere. So how are your programs stacking up? How are you differentiating yourself? What value? I mean, students are looking at everything. The program might be one thing, the courses might be great. It might be their interest area. But how else are you supporting them and creating that whole experience for them? And how is that evolving? And how are you using all these other things like AI and such that we have there? How is your faculty supporting them? How are they teaching them? I mean, there's all these factors come into play. And if they're not getting that, they're one click away from the next school, and they're going to pull their, they're going to leave. And as we know, enrollment is always a consideration. And again, to go back to the business adage of shopping and structure and your customers, you're getting 85% of your business from 15% of your people. Well, that's probably your core ones. And then the other adage is it's cheaper to keep your current customers than to spend money to get new ones. Applying it educationally, it's easier to keep your existing students than to try to go out and get new ones to replace them all the time. You want to keep the new ones adding on. So all that to me was very powerful and reinforces what we do every day, what reinforces what we see ourselves in when we teach, we see that. But if institutions pay attention to one thing, and obviously they are because of some of the other data that was in here, is that they're listening to the relevance of the students and what the student is really looking for in order to rebuild and enhance their programs.
One of the stats that stood out to me was that the leaders expect the traditional classroom experience to change in the next 5 years.
Yes.
And I was thinking that is absolutely my experience of working with students. And I was in a training yesterday that was all about using my classroom technology so that I could improve my hybrid teaching, right? That expectation that students are going to be attending in the classroom and virtually, that I'm going to have students from other locations joining in, and that is our new normal, right? If it's an in-person class, that we will have students in other locations, or whether it's a synchronous virtual class, which I've also taught a lot of in the last year, which again is something that I think it allows more access for learners. So from an institutional perspective, you can reach more students. You can enroll more students if you are creating these options for them. They don't all have to be, on location at your 4-year live in a dorm institution. So students are asking for that, and it's schools that are responding are going to be able to enroll students from different geographic areas. And as I work with a lot of dual enrolled high school students as well, and as the parent of a high schooler, I see that this option is really appealing to students. When we talk about the return on investment in their education, and they're thinking, well, why am I going to spend all this money on living space and a food plan and all of that when I could stay home that first year and attend virtually? So they are really thinking about those things. And so again, from the perspective of the student and the learner, that's what they want. And the schools that are going to respond to that are going to be able to pull from a whole different collection of students than they previously were.
Oh, absolutely. And that segues totally to the point also in that report about the faculty preparedness.
Yes.
And you can't retain and you can't grow and you can't excel at all these other things if you don't have the faculty that are prepared. And by and large, the vast majority of it supported by adjuncts. We all know that schools have the full-time faculty that are teaching a good bulk of that, but by and large, it's still the adjunct that does that. So if you're feeling that only, I believe the stat was like 28%, felt, if I'm remembering that correctly, thought that their faculty were prepared to do this, is kind of scary. Here
And
you're,
they're asking faculty to do it more. Like now,
yeah,
almost all faculty report that they are teaching a mix of, their expectation is that they're teaching a mix of in-person and online, or having some type of online component to even their in-person classes.
and they may not be prepared.
Right.
And then how are they developing those courses? You can't just take your online and put it, or excuse me, on ground and put it online. And that came up too, where they're looking at the projections and that the lecture is going away. Because, so that again, so how are we preparing the faculty to be able to teach effectively, to reach these different expectations of students, these different mix of students? How are we, so if we aren't going to invest in the faculty, you're still going to, you're still kicking the same can down the road.
Right.
And I think if they find, it doesn't take a lot. I mean, and sometimes it's just, you could give them some little minor trainings, little workshops. We all attend them. We've done them. We've created our own and done them for universities, to do that type of, teach the faculty how to do that. And they love it when they get that support because they feel supported by the institution. They feel energized and motivated. They teach anyways, not to get wealthy, but they teach to be able to give back and to convey the information that they know, because they believe in their knowledge is important, and that the students are there to better their lives in some way, shape, or form. So just by investing that little bit of support and time into making sure, this was in there too, students are tech savvy now. I mean, from the time they're, babies, they're using, their parents' phones and iPads. So they come into it very tech savvy. And a lot of faculty might be tech savvy too for those things, but there's other skills that are needed to be able to teach effectively, to support students, to reach students. Sometimes faculty get in a rut to live and die in that same old, structure of, I'm going to do a lecture, and then we're going to discuss this, and then you're going to do a written paper, maybe it's how can we incorporate adaptive learning? How is that going to come in? How is AI going to support what the students do? How can we use those tools as faculty to make the courses better, for students to learn better, to be happier, to retain, to persist? It's a vicious circle. So but all these pieces that were brought up in this finding are really interrelated. So you can't just, there's only so much money, so many budgets. You can't really necessarily pick and choose. You might have to, but in some way, shape, or form, they're all connected.
And one of the factors that the Khloe 10 report talked about was that investment in instructional design, and how important that is, and how important that is in supporting faculty, right? So we know we need to train faculty to teach online. You and I talk a lot about building community in our online classrooms. So showing faculty how you can transfer that in-person community experience that you create into your online classroom. So we certainly need to train faculty. But we also know that investment in the instructional design piece, in setting up that classroom, creating consistent learning for students, creating consistent learning across a program, and how important that is for the student learning experience. It's one thing to say, well, I'm investing in online, or we're creating more online programs, but you want to make them good, right?
Right.
That's what's going to keep students coming back, as they had a positive learning experience in that classroom and with their instructor. That's their customer facing experience. So how do we make the most of that? So I was glad to see that institutions are investing in instructional design, but that's where I think that's the key to
And how is
attracting and
that?
retaining students.
Yeah, how does that show up? Is it okay now, we're this big institution of 30,000 students and we have one instructional designer.
Great. We
Is
see
that your
that all the time.
is that
There's
your
a team of one
investment?
or two
You
people
know,
for an entire
how is
university.
that, and that one is, how is that? They might have, maybe they created some trainings but they just, realistically, they can't support that many people. And then how do there's accessibility concerns, there's RSI coming up, there's, how are we, the new things with AI or, publisher tools, all these ways that you can create great content in addition to what's in the faculty's head or the subject matter person's head that's creating it. How are we going to pull that out and create that? So part of the programmatic aspect of some of the expansion and maybe those investments, like you said, is hopefully in investing in some way, shape, or form, being outside firms, additional staff, however you're going to approach that, temporary or short term, to be able to provide that consistency and quality that's in your program, to make sure that once the students get in there, one, are you achieving the outcomes that you're supposed to be achieving? Two, are you, addressing all the accessibility and RSI concerns to make sure that you're, creating that community. The faculty has the tools to do it well, to provide the feedback, and how to make that, not just a one-off, because you'll have some adjuncts, you'll have some faculty that really embrace it and know it and how to do it. But by and large, most of them, they'd love to have you show them, or they could help with if someone had the support to do it. But so how does that impact? You can have all great goals as an institution, but if you don't start with the great foundation of quality courses, with creating those, the foundation is going to crumble.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And
Mhm.
once that foundation is in place of a really well-developed course that is a good fit for the modality, right? So whether it's hybrid
Right.
or in-person or online, and then empowering your faculty, giving them all the tools they need so they know how to use it well and know how
That's
to
where an
work with
ID really
students.
shines. Like your point you just said there. It's one that you say, okay, I'm going to teach this course in a hybrid modality. An instructional designer can help you take it. Well, here's the core course. Here's how you can do it on ground. Here's how you can do it hybrid. Here's how we're going to do it online, because they're not universal, as you know. You teach it all the time like that in different settings. You might have the same course in 3 different approaches, and each one takes a different way of teaching in order to support the student in the best manner. So that's a lot on a faculty member to try to figure out how to do that well, instead of just plunking in the materials and then just winging it. So yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
I had an experience where I was teaching the same class 2 days a week. One was an in-person class, and then in the afternoon, I had a synchronous virtual version of the class with
Mhm.
students in different locations. And it was, worked in this field for so long, but to have that experience of every Tuesday and Thursday, the same class in 2 different modalities, and to really experience that and what that's like as a faculty member, and thinking about my students and
Mhm.
getting feedback from them about how to create that community in different ways, how students work in groups in different ways, and how do we want to interact and approach the material in different ways, was a fascinating lesson for me, and I'm grateful for my students who in both modalities gave me really good feedback, but it really impressed upon me how important this work is to do instructional design for different modalities, that they
Oh,
need the
absolutely.
improvement. Right. Maybe you can use the same PowerPoint, but you're using it in a different way when you're in
Right.
front of students physically and when you're in a virtual environment.
Yeah.
And thinking about that. So it was it really impressed upon me the importance of that we have to approach the modalities differently. And that brings me to the next point, Sheila. Talk about the importance of flexibility for our learners and how we can incorporate that into our programs and in our classrooms.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think this is especially important too, as one of the other key points was the program growth, not just courses. They're looking at expanding programs. So as you're doing all those things, you need to think about the flexibility. What modalities are you doing? How are you going to tackle this? So the flexibility standpoint to me kind of boils down to, I talk a lot about education for all and inclusivity in that type of aspect. So to me, the flexibility standpoint is, how are you going to achieve the outcomes in a way that allows students to show mastery that may not be a fixed type deliverable? It doesn't have to be a paper. Everything doesn't have to be a paper. you know I mean, and now as faculty, we look at, okay, how is AI helping students create content? This kind of changes also how you kind of perhaps approach design and how you're doing these things. um but maybe you're giving them, to me, flexibility is options is how they can learn, being adaptive learning. Maybe there's AI tutoring. Maybe there's some sort of group support. But then it could be, flexibility from the course material side, but then flexibility also in how you're submitting. Maybe the student gets to pick. I've done this with the courses that I teach. I give them options to how they want to submit something based on what their strengths are. Maybe they love to write and they want to write a paper. Maybe they want to do a PowerPoint because they have those skills and they like the visual side of presenting something. Or maybe they want to do a video. Maybe they want to talk about that. I mean, we know that everybody's, on a 2-second TikTok doing something, and everyone's very familiar with doing the videos. So that makes it very easy. But allowing them to do it to their strengths, one, allows them to be excited about actually working on it. It also addresses accessibility issues where you're not forcing someone to do something because maybe you know, they haven't gone through a formal accommodation process, or they're choosing not to tell you that they have an accommodation. How can you be flexible in those types of areas?
I think too, when we think about flexibility, is offering the resources and the materials in different formats.
Mhm,
And I
mhm.
was in a training recently where someone said, "Do I really have to make a PDF and a video and a PowerPoint of everything?" And the answer was, well, yes, if you want all of your students to be able to access the information.
Yeah.
And it's about access, right? It's
Mhm.
the student is traveling, so maybe they won't be able to watch the video, but they can go through the slides or they can download the PDF before they leave.
Mhm.
So all of the different reasons why we need to access information differently, as well as student preference, right? Maybe they want to watch a video, listen to a video. So thinking about all of the different ways, and it takes a few minutes, right, to convert that PowerPoint into a PDF. It's not a ton. Yes, it's time consuming work on our end, but in the long run, over the course of a semester, it's not a ton of our time to prepare those materials. And I think too, when we think about different modalities and being flexible, is we really need to think about what fits that modality. And something that I really noticed when I was teaching that same class in two different modalities was the amount of time it takes for us as a class to get through material if we're working through something or I'm explaining something,
Mhm.
and the amount of time it takes for groups to work together. Groups working together in person can work much quicker than groups working together on a virtual assignment. And
Absolutely.
thinking
Mhm.
about
Mhm.
how people in different locations who aren't stuck together for an hour and a half in the same space need more time. And
Mhm.
I found myself saying, it's okay that I'm extending the deadline for this group. They need an
Mhm.
extra day because of the limitations of this modality.
No,
And
absolutely.
thinking about that as well, that, just again, I think for a while it was, oh, well, online, we have to replicate the in-class experience. And it's, oh, or do we need to ensure that whatever the modality is, they're meeting the learning objectives and they're mastering those learning
Exactly.
objectives.
That's what's
So how
most
do we ever do
important. That's what it's exactly that's what's most important. I mean, if you can't compare the time on an 8-week course to a full semester 15-week course in what you cover. You just can't. I mean, in a 15-week, yes, you're hitting all the outcomes, but you're able to talk about some other things that you probably haven't, or do some more activities that reinforce or stretch one concept over 2 weeks instead of one. Where in an 8-week compressed accelerated format, you don't have that. So you focus on the outcomes.
Mhm.
But what I think is also essential here kind of is talking about, the adaptive learning ability and how can technology be utilized to help them learn, which is with AI, as we'll talk about more too, will, how does that impact the materials that we're creating? How does that impact even as for what we do with when we help create programs and courses and content like that with institutions? What is the budget for the extra things we can put in there? How are we using, interactive activities, little short things that can reinforce if it's like an economics lesson or something, here's a great spot to do an activity on the supply chain. You could put the bell and they could work through it and they understand so they can see visually, using technology how that topic or that concept is illustrated. It reinforces that learning process, and it allows something maybe you would have done in class and drawn it on a whiteboard or a smart board or something here, but you're bringing it online and you're allowing them to be more engaged with the content instead of necessarily having to digest a lecture or something else. But it allows them to pick and choose. I think we'll see more of that, especially with the adaptive learning, where they'll be able to pick and choose, like you said, different types of concepts, different types of layout or availability for how they can access it, to not only how they learn, but what can reinforce it and what can, when they're maybe assessed on something later, you can provide them additional tools to reinforce what they're doing and maybe improve.
Let's talk a little bit more about that AI component. The
Mhm,
Khloe report talks about how schools are saying that AI is not coordinated across their entire institution, that
mhm,
some schools say they have a strategy. Schools that we work with and schools that we teach for, we know are incorporating AI guidelines or
mhm,
policies. So schools say they're investing in AI for online programs, for course preparation, and to improve efficiencies, but they're not necessarily using AI for student advising or for learning personalization, which is always one of those things that, so AI
right.
can do this, but that
Mhm.
institutions are not necessarily using it for that. So where do you see this going and how can schools be taking full advantage of this?
Thinking and planning. I was kind of surprised that where it said only, I think, 23% had an AI plan, which this isn't new. We're approaching what, the third year now, kind of where this has really come out and used. Um, it probably is back to when, you know, computers came out instead of the written one, and we're doing this. And how did schools? So probably it took that long for them to embrace it as well. Um, but I think it's more of, I think the expansion will be in the support areas. You'll see more AI tutoring. I see that in some of the places where I teach, that they have a virtual tutor that students can use. And it's not to replace the instructor, it's to get rid of those emails or contacts where the simple question is, when is this due? Or where do I find this in the book? Or those types of things, that because it pulls from all your content that you have in the course to answer the question. So it's not replacing you, it's just, helping out. Um, but I see more access with that coming up, where they're going to, how can we use it to support them? Maybe it's how do I find out about financial aid? How do I find out these resources on campus? How do I register for my next class? Those types of things in addition to this. But as it says there too, not only do students want workforce skills, but they want that support and that feeling of community. And if they feel engaged, they're going to persist, they're going to stay at your institution. So if they can use AI to even do some of that and then get them to somebody else when they really need that help, they'll feel more comfortable. But I think it's also going to be, I think it's really going to change in two things. It's going to change how students complete work, whether it's, APA comes out with how you cite AI in your work, how we design content as educators, as faculty, as designers, to say, okay, how are we going to teach them the skills with how to do this? Is it that they use it to maybe create an outline, they submit that outline, and then they actually have to create everything else on their own? So that way you take away that aspect of I've used AI to do the whole thing then. And I think it will change how the materials are delivered. So for me, what we do when we work with clients to design courses, how can we use it then to create pathways that students can learn to be able to show that mastery for the outcomes? So will it be, again, going back to where they're perceiving the lecture will go away? You still have to convey that knowledge some way. How are you going to do that different? Is it videos? Is it interactive activities? Is it, the publishers? Is it simulation? They're responding to those types of things. So I think it's taking a step back and also go back to our very beginning, listening to those students. What do they want? They want the workforce relevance. They want to make sure they have skills that they can use. We talk about too, you see this, is this going to impact the trend with a 3-year degree? Will that allow them to start to look at that area more? So I think we're in the infancy stage for education. We're a little slow to respond, a little less to embrace, but eventually we have to for some reasons. I really think this institutions that the 23% that have that plan probably already looking at how are we going to incorporate this into courses? How are we going to make this stronger? Because the students are looking for that and they want and expect a robust learning experience.
And you make a good point about it's coming from student demand, right?
Mm-hmm.
Students want more of it. Students are using AI. They want to learn to use it well because they know they're going to need it at work. And even for that community piece, I think something that's been really fun to watch is some schools are creating their AI chatbot as kind of a mascot. So It's not just, oh, you click the chat or the help, it's you're clicking to talk to Bucky. And, Bucky's just like another mascot that can help you answer your questions. So adding that personification and that personality to that school's AI, I think adds to that sense of community and that sense of, oh, this is like a little AI being that knows about the school that's going to help me get to my next step and direct me
And it's not
to
scary.
where I need to go. Yeah.
It's
And
known, it's friendly. Yeah.
And that's what students have come to expect in their, you talked about shopping and their online shopping experiences. All right. What do you think the big takeaways are, and who's the primary benefactor of all of this investment in online?
Students. They're the biggest benefactor. They're going to get what they've been asking for. They're going to get what they've wanted. The schools are, to me, the most exciting thing is seeing the desire to create new programs, because as unfortunately the institutions that have closed are the ones that didn't listen to this and have the old programs that, even though have been struggling for years with low enrollment, never expanded. So to see, especially I see it a lot in the graduate areas where I see the most programmatic growth. And it's exciting to see that they are listening to what the students want, recognizing that there is demand for this, to be able to put that investment in there to say, hey, we're not just going to add a course in XYZ. We're going to create a whole program that embraces this, that gives them the essential skills, the knowledge that employers want, but also that students are looking for. So that to me is exciting, because that to me says education is evolving, education is trying to improve and adapt. So those investments like that, I think, are what's most exciting to me, because again, like you said, who does it boil down to? The students are the benefactors. They're the ones that are going to, in the end, and you're going to take away the competition aspect of it. You create a new program, you create a differentiating value to what makes your program different than your competitor's program, who's one click away. the enrollment will come, the students will stay, and everyone will win.
Hmm. Fantastic. Sheila, thank you so much for joining me today.
Sure.
Today's episode is brought to you by Professor Services. Looking for a job in teaching? Need to expand your network? Want to boost your income? Whatever it is, the expert team at Professor Services has you covered. From helping higher ed faculty find new jobs, to essential tools such as cover letters and CVs, to applying to jobs for you, Professor Services equips you to nail your job search. Don't stress over the job hunt. Maximize your potential and crush your next opportunity with support from our team of experienced administrators, mentors, and educators. Discover how the team at Professor Services can help. Visit professorservices.com today to get started and kickstart your career in higher education.